Hello there, welcome to another edition of the Open Governance Initiative, the OGI. We're coming to you from the Gambia radio and television services like we do every week here on every Monday. We bring you the relevant ministries, department agencies to take stock of the National Development Plan 2018-2021. Today we're taking a closer look at the Ministry of Trade, Industry, Employment and Regional Integration, in short, the Ministry of Trade, and the Permanent Secretary Ibrahim Sisawa is already here with us, accompanied by the Director of Trade there, Usman Bojang. We'll be looking at exactly what they're doing at the same ministry. Of course, my name is Fatu Eli Kamloshi, your presenter of this program. We've also been following your comments on social media. We'll be taking a closer look at those as well here on this program. When we come back from the break, my guests will help me expand the conversation. Do stay. Welcome back to the OGI. We're coming to you from the Gambia radio and television services. My name is Fatu Eli Kamloshi, and like I said, our guest today is the Permanent Secretary at the Ministry of Trade there, Mr. Ibrahim Sisawa, and the PS is joined by the Director of Trade at the same ministry, Mr. Usman Bojang. PS, you're welcome to the OGI.
Thank you very much.
Director, you're also welcome.
Thank you very much.
PS, let me of course start off with you, and it's great to have you once again here on the OGI. I'd just like to start off with the fact that the NDP recognizes that this sector, which is the trade sector, was at risk in 2018, owing it to a weak trade environment and aging port infrastructure. Tell us what's been done to increase the opportunities since then.
Thank you very much, and thank you for having me here once again. Yeah, yes, Minister of Trade, as the name would suggest, is responsible or has a mandate to ensure that there is both domestic and international trade development as one of our key mandates. We have other mandates like employment creations, regional integrations, industrial and enterprise development. But then trade development is very, very key in our execution of our duties. Yes, there was a weak trade environment, and that has been recognized by the NDP, and this is why when the strategies that we develop under the MTP, we try to create a component of how we develop trade both domestically and then internationally, and then that outlines some of the key strategies and interventions that the ministry has taken on board. Key among these is looking at the domestic level. We've identified one of the key weaknesses in intra-trade, that is trade within the country, as the non-value addition to the goods that are being traded, and just generally the agricultural products. So we felt for the country to improve on this internal trade, there has to be a lot of domestic value addition, and this you also are able to do that by empowering the MSMEs. That's the medium and small enterprises. So the ministry, one of these strategies and intervention has been how to build the capacity of these MSMEs.
We'll come to that.
Yes.
But let's just go back to, again, the aging port infrastructure, to be precise. Has anything been done to amend the situation?
Yes, as far as I'm aware, there have been a lot of efforts and engagements with international partners to modernize the ports, because we know it is one of the central infrastructure in development of trade. Unfortunately, the Gambia Ports Authority is not directly under the Minister of Trade, but we do a lot of we interact a lot in terms of trading. So recently we've been invited to join their board, and I know there are a lot of interventions and investments in trying to improve the ports facilities so that they can live up to the standard, because it's key if you want to promote trade both at the international level and at the local level.
Director, let me come to you. Would you support exactly what the PS has said, and what, in terms of concrete actions, have we seen in that regard?
Yeah, thank you very much. Just like what the PS said, in terms of the concrete actions, we're looking at the turnaround time of the vessels that comes to Banjul, We understand that compared to the neighboring countries, so many of them can stay. For example, in Dakar, they can stay up to 2-3 days. They can offload and then go back. So that has Gambia. They can sometimes stay up to a week. So because of the dredging, the depths in the port. So the port invests in the dredging system on a project that they dredge the port now. So it's easy for the cargo to come, and I think now they can even do two shipments at a go. So that has improved the turnaround in terms of coming to Banjul and then moving from Banjul. And also this has also facilitated the movement of traffic in the port. So because once the traffic is slowed, this can create additional cost called demurrage, demurrage charges.
And where is this traffic coming from?
This is international trade. This is coming from all over Asia, European countries. So what we've observed is without that intervention of the port in terms of the dredging system, in creating the dredging, then most of these vessels will come and then they can stay very long, sometimes 1 week, 2 weeks, they are on the sea, and that's a cost of business. And that also can have additional effect on the prices of some of these products that we are consuming in the country. So that has been one major achievement. Secondly, we've been complaining about, in terms of the port infrastructure, in terms of congestions at the port. So recently what they've done was to get a place outside the port so that they move all especially the vehicles that will come.
So they've got a place outside the port. Where is that as well?
That's the Bone Road. That's the place at the Bone Road in Banjul.
And that is conducive for this kind of activity?
Yeah, so that's the place where they move all the vehicles. So now in terms of movement of containers, it's a little bit faster. So that has reduced the congestion at the port. So we are seeing that as a measure of facilitating trade. As he said, we are not directly involved, but we collaborate with them, and then we tell them what needs to be done for us to be able to facilitate trade at the port.
Pierce, let me just come back to you, because in as much as this very sector or industry has been doing a lot in just creating job opportunities, employment, generating income, which is like a key role you do there. Talk to us about the changes in the trade policy and how that has affected the Gambia's advantage of a trade hub.
Yes, actually there have been some major international events, and that has impacted directly on our trade policies. And you will realize that Gambia is part of a regional bloc, and one important shift in the trade or international trade has to do with the fact that Africa as a continent is coming together to create a continental free trade area. And this is one area that has shifted the whole idea of trade, both internationally and then domestically. So we, as the Ministry of Trade, has to align our trade policies to speak to that international arrangement, and that's very, very critical. So we have put in place a lot of strategies in place so that the opportunities in that trade policies will not take us off guard.
We'll come back to that same Africa trade area, but let me just go back to the director here, because recognizing already these challenges, how is the collaboration with partners, especially those in the export destinations, coming along in terms of just technical support in this endeavor?
Thank you. So I'll just throw some light on what Pierre said in terms of trade policy guidelines over the period of the NDP, because before the NDP, our focus has always been the international trade. How do we promote our exports? But in terms of domestic trade, creating the environment for market linkages, we did not do much on that. But with the NDP, we've been able to diversify that policy. So the new the policy shifts is, even though we have some international trade priorities, we also look at the domestic trade. So we try to create market linkages in the domestic front, especially. I'm sure this is one of the questions that we will also elaborate, especially in terms of creating market linkages for horticultural producers.
We'll come back to the local ones. Yes, you mentioned your international priorities. What are those?
Internationally, we we always, in terms of our export destination, the European Union continue to be the main export destination for the Gambia. But what we observe is that European Union, they always come with some standards that are very difficult to meet, especially on our products like agricultural products like groundnuts. Groundnut, the aflatoxin, I don't know whether you know aflatoxin.
Of course.
This is something that has been difficult for us due to poor handling or poor service handling. So the policy shift has been now, instead of the European Union, the export diversification has been to the Southeast Asian countries like India, like Vietnam, like China. So now most of our products, especially groundnuts, for example, cashew, for example, these are products that are now moving to these countries.
So these countries, they're not very much concerned about standards?
They have,
why exactly?
They have, but the levels, because if you look at this, the aflatoxin, there are different levels of aflatoxins. And these levels can be accepted if you do a proper risk assessment. You have to do a risk assessment to know that at this level is risk to the health of my people, then you can come with a regulation. So European Union, usually their standards are usually very high. So, but compared to these other countries, they have reasonable low standards of these aflatoxins. So they can easily move to those countries. So we've seen that a policy shift in terms of our export market, into those countries.
And this is a good thing, would you say?
Yeah, because this is good in terms of market penetration.
But the European market is also a very big one.
Yeah.
So diverting that aspect and just going to these other ones, or they still incorporated?
Yeah, European market is a good market, but you have to work on whilst we work on the standard requirements of the EU market, then we will also try to see the opportunities in other markets. So you don't have to wait until you meet all the standards in this market before you enter. Otherwise, you cannot trade.
So you're saying there's a standard deficiency here, PS, if you could just add on that.
Yes.
Really, because this is also a very important part of the conversation, but we can just briefly talk about it.
Yeah, I think what the director is trying to say is that for now, we have to be honest to ourselves. There are certain standards that we have not met, but then there are standards that we met. But having said that, we already have a standard bureau. That's an agency that is trying to work on the standards so that we are able to meet all the standards required for our goods to be able to meet the export requirement.
But this standard bureau, do they also have the capacity and what it takes to make sure that they do exactly that?
Actually, they've made some achievement because this year alone they are able to develop up to 15 standards and regulations in some of the, and we are expecting to develop up to 25 new standards. So yeah, even though there are constraints and challenges, but the reality is that we are moving towards improving our standard in terms of exports. So the European standard, for now, yes, even though we are exploring it, we go for the easier options. That's the Asia standard. But that's not to say that we are ignoring the European standard. So we are working very fast to also try to improve the standard of our export so that we can penetrate both Europe and the Asia market. But the other important thing is that the Africa market also is an opportunity because, again, going back to the AFCFTA, what it is going to bring is that there will be a lot of regional trade within Africa, and it will be cheaper because of the common tariffs. And so that's also something that we have put into our plan,
okay, so
that there can be a lot of Africa.
Let's still open up the conversation a bit before we go into those specifics, right? Because the country writes on a free market policy. This is to say it's based on demand supply basis, regardless of what the price, really, or the cost of goods and services. Everybody is just basically free to tack any price on their goods and just go about that, and nothing happens to them. How is that in fact trickling down to the GDP growth first, before we go into it proper?
Well, free market is very, very important. I know it can have some negative effect, but then usually as a regulator or as a ministry responsible for trade, we are a bit careful not to disrupt the free market interaction, because usually it comes with a lot of negativity, and one of the key characteristics of interfering with the price has to do with shortage. And one thing we need to also understand is the fact that we need to be realistic in the sense that most of the goods that we trade in or that we import or that we rely on, as we would call essential commodities, are coming from outside. So what that means is that the cost component of those trade, tend to be predetermined. And price to a large extent depend on the cost of production. So basically, in as much as you want to regulate, try to control that prices are stable, you also have to be careful not to fix a price or dictate a price that is not realistic, and that what that will happen or what that will lead to is that it will mean most of the businesses will tend to pull out of the business.
Is this something that has been suggested, or this is something that the officials and just the relevant departments came together and realized that it could be our case if we have to take the reverse?
Can you come back again? I don't
I meant to ask that this idea that you're saying that if we have to put any kind of price tag on these goods and just peg it at a particular price rate, it might affect the level of imports because most of these essentials are imported. Is this something that you realized together as stakeholders, or this was just something that pretty much just inherited?
Well, again, you see, dictating the price means you have some form of control over the price, and unfortunately for us, our prices are dictated mainly from the outside forces, because majority of the goods that are consumed here comes from outside. And then the dynamics around those goods tend to change rapidly, especially during this COVID period. A lot of things have changed. And if you don't have control over those forces, these are external forces, if you don't have control over it, it is difficult to sit here and then come up with a standard in terms of the price, because what it can create is that you might push a lot of people outside the business. And the example is that if I spend so much to bring goods to this country, and then the ministry decided to say I have to sell my goods at this without looking at the cost structure of what is involved, it's usually very difficult. But what the ministry do, we have a lot of measures to also try to address these challenges. But one of the things we try to do is also to encourage competition. Because once there is competition, it tends to bring the price of the goods down, because you are into business, somebody else is into business. There's chances that you will not collude. So
right now there is not much competition going on in these especially essential goods. Which ones are you saying in fact we're importing in the country?
I mean, the basic essential, majority of the essential commodities are imported from this country. The oil, the rice, you call it the soaps, a lot of things. Soap?
I thought we were making soap here as well, or we are not making a major part of that as well. So it's like always we're making small and there's not much competition. But even the vegetables and even the fish that we're, taking out of our own waters, they're actually increasing on a daily basis.
Yes. The price of fishes were increasing. So the price mainly has to do with the issue of demand and supply. So if there is a shortage of supply, maybe because of we have not been getting the right supply in terms of the fishing, and then that will impact on the price. I mean, these are definitely our natural resources. But then if it's a simple case. If you have abundant fishes in the market, the price will naturally go down. But where the supply, there is a shortage in supply, then obviously the price will. So
what you're saying is fish is scarce, and that is why there is actually an increment in price. But let me just go back to the director there, because is it also the case as in that most of these fisher folks are not Gambians, because we got that, that exclamation as well, or that even the bread sometimes is increasing? Is it also because those that are making the bread are also not Gambians? So what is really the problem here, if you would analyze from your own perspective?
Yeah, just like what the PS said, price is always determined by demand and supply. So if you are not responsible for the supply of that product, how do you fix that price? Then it means that as government, we are net importers of food. So we are price takers. So if government comes now to say we're going to fix the prices, it means that government must be in the position to supply. So if government is not supplying, then the suppliers of that product may not be able to continue the supply because government price may be something that would not work well with them in terms of their cost structures.
But then, PS, the government is not going to indulge in anything that is not going to yield any kind of dividend for it and its GDP growth. That is to say, how is this free market policy really paying dividends to the GDP growth of the country?
Well, you see, again, free market is not a problem. The problem maybe, or the solution to the problem is to increase our productive base of some of these commodities, and that maybe another ministry will be responsible for that.
Yes, and in fact, we still talk about how you mentioned competition and how it's important and what's been done at local level, because still there's a lot more that needs to be done. But then, this approach, is it really working for us?
This is the best options available as far as the Ministry of Trade is concerned. I mean, it's a question of whether we should allow the price to be determined by the free market forces or to be determined by fixing or coming up with a standard price. So it's a question of choosing between the two. We are saying if you fix the price, the dangers are very, very evident, and then it could backfire on the government decision.
Because that makes me want to ask that, its effect on the everyday consumer as well, who might also be a service provider at some point, still sees little or no changes in wages and salaries, because if there's going to be this increase in the price of commodities, also must go side by side with the increase of salaries and wages. But is this the case?
Again, we are limited to Ministry of Trade. The increase in salary, definitely yes, makes sense to increase salary so that it can counterbalance the inflation. I wish we have that authority to do, but that's under the mandate of a different ministry. But yeah, I agree with you entirely. If prices are going up, yeah, obviously the salaries should also be elevated to match that.
Certainly. I mean, Director, is that something that you would also want to chip in, really? Because I would assume that you would take this on with the relevant ministries of labor or whatever is really, whichever is dealing directly with that increment of wages and salaries. But you are cognizant of the increase of prices of commodities. Then you realize that it must go concurrently with the increase of salaries and wages. How are you taking that on with them as well?
Just like what the PS said, that is the level of the Ministry of Finance. In terms of us as a ministry, we have the employment and the labor department. So us, we just focus on the minimum wage, and then that minimum wage will not give you the enough that you might need to be able to catch up with the prices. So Ministry of Finance should be able to look at the markets and able to give a corresponding wage increment or salary increment accordingly, but are they in a position in terms of the resources that is available to be able to do that? Because salary increment is also something that you cannot increase salary today and tomorrow you reduce it. So yes, so is it sustainable? Because finance also will look at the overall revenue impact of that and the expenditure of that in government budget. So if we increase salaries, are we be able to sustain that increment in salaries as price move on?
I get your point, so but then who gains here? Who gains here, PS? The governments, the institutions, or the everyday citizen?
Well, the intention of every government is to improve the welfare of the citizens. But then again, I think if we are looking for a solution to this, you see, if you depend so much on your essential commodity, if you depend so much from on outside, it tends to be very difficult to regulate the price.
That is to say, we're yet to be free.
Well, the statistics are obvious. We do a lot of importations, and because we do a lot of importations, it's difficult to stabilize the price. We do efforts as a Ministry of Trade to come up with a lot of some intervention or strategies to try to stabilize the price, and this includes the waiving of some duties on some of these essential commodities. Again, he talks about the fact that we worked with GPA to ensure that cost elements such as demurrage charges are avoided, and then the turnaround time at the GPA also is also minimized, so that the importers can have access to their goods, and then this can be delivered. Because also again, if there is shortage of supply, that also tend to push the price up. So we as a ministry, we are also always very always make sure that there is the stock adequate stock level in town, because their directorate monitors that. Always there is adequate stock level of this essential commodity, so that at no given time there is shortage, which tend to send panic and then send the price up.
And that's been happening?
Or you've been doing that.
And also, have you realized that the decrease in these cost of duties has in any way affected the price at which these, the sellers are selling the goods and just delivering the services?
Yes, so we...
Could it be that you decrease the duties, but then once they go to the end consumer, they go about with their normal prices that they're offering?
So we are always in constant touch with these the major importers. So whenever we reduce duties, we tend to sit with them and then discuss with them how, and then look at how this reduction will impact in terms of the cost. And then we literally negotiate with them to be able to push the price down. Sometimes I think the problem also had to do with the too many middlemen.
I was going to come to that.
Yeah, exactly. So we try to minimize that as well. And one thing government is trying to also do is to also build the capacity of other potential businessmen, so that they can also enter the market and disrupt the arrangements, especially where we feel there are a group of people are trying to collude to corner the market. We try to minimize that problem by pushing more people, empowering them so that they can also enter into the business, and that increase competition, and competition tend to reduce the price of the basic commodities.
We'll talk more about competition and just local products when we come to the SMEs, but here, Director, what would you say is our biggest exporting product at this point in time, and how sustainable would this be in the very long term?
Thank you. In terms of the statistics we have of our exports, we continue to be resource-based products. These are agricultural products, and mainly we have groundnuts, which is our biggest export products, and
still our biggest export product.
And still among the biggest export in terms of domestic export. You know, if you look at export, we have to differentiate between re-export and domestic export. If you look at the total export of Gambia, 80% of the total export that goes out from the Gambia is re-export trade. Re-export meaning these are goods that are already imported in the country, or you have some traders that are in the sub-region. They will come and buy and then sell them to other countries. So this is mainly this consume a lot of our export. So the domestic component is mainly 15-20% of the total export, and that 15-20% groundnut constitute a very high figure.
And these groundnut producers, are they Gambians?
The traders, the producers are Gambians, but the traders, some of the traders are not Gambians. They will buy and export. Some of them are the Indians. They have some companies there, so they will buy and export. But you will also know that the GGC, which is a government authority responsible in the regulation of the groundnut, is also a player in the market like any other player. So we have a full-blown government institution that's a player in terms of purchase and selling of groundnut.
Director, PS rather, would you wish that there be more in that production level? Because as we speak, the Gambia is dependent on rain-fed. Of course, with the changing climate and just the erratic, rainfall patterns, has it in any way affected this export base?
For groundnut?
Groundnut.
Yes, it does. There is usually, because groundnut is so much subject to the climate conditions, and then they tend to be erratic, especially looking at the pattern of rainfall the past years. So yes, it has some negative impacts on the level of production of groundnut. But that aside, there are a lot of cost element to groundnut, and I think one thing we need to do as a country is to also try to diversify. And I'm so Minister of Agriculture is working on that as well, because if you look at how much is spent on subsidizing groundnut, I recall last year we spent government spent over 215 million just to subsidize groundnut. Yes, and then if you look at the fertilizer component that is also spent on groundnut, and then looking at all these cost components, if you remove it from groundnut, you tend to wonder whether we are making gain out of it or not. So I think much as, because we are, it's our cash crop and we are emotionally attached to it.
I can see that,
but
that we're so much attached to it, yet we're getting so little, would you say?
Yeah, so it's either we work on value addition, and which I think should be a priority, or we think of doing a lot of diversification in terms of looking at other products like cashew and other cereals.
Now come back to diversification, and not only in agriculture but in other areas as well. When we come back from this very short break that we're about to take, the PS and the director still stays with us. Welcome back to the OGI. We're coming to you from the Gambia Radio and Television Services, and we've been talking to the Ministry of Trade. We have the Permanent Secretary here, Ibrahim Asisawa, as well as the Director of Trade, Usman Bojang, with us here, and we've been talking about a whole range of issues, especially price. Emphasis has been on that as well, which I think is very important in the conversation because it keeps coming up as well. But PS, in that regard as well, we see a proliferation of small businesses with the support from the International Trade Center in partnership with GAIPA and all these other relevant institutions. Tell us, how is the motivation of the private sector really coming along?
Yeah, this is one of the key policy direction of the ministry, and because given at looking at the smallness of our economy, you might not expect to have big multinational companies in this country. So our focus tends to be how we build the capacity of the MSMEs, that's the micro, medium, small enterprises.
So why can we not have the big enterprises?
I mean, it tend to, there's a lot of challenges in having them here. Like, for example, one of the key indicators to attracting big investment has to be energy. And we have to be realistic. Our energy cost in the country is very, very expensive. Or it's relatively expensive, and that's one deterring factor as far as investment is concerned. And again, there are a lot of factors that are considered for big-time investment. But this is not just peculiar to Gambia. I mean, generally in Africa, attracting big multinational companies is usually a challenge. So what Africa tend to look at is their MSME, that's a small, medium enterprise. Because we, as a region, also believe that there is a lot of opportunities in these MSMEs. So we look at Africa, Gambia included, as an opportunity to build the capacity of MSMEs, and then try to thrive so that they thrive and then do a lot of businesses around them.
And so we're talking about sub-regional integration and just making sure that we promote the African market. Yet there are other, countries in Africa that are very much advancing. You talk about South Africa, Nigeria, and they have big corporates. How do we compete with them as well then?
In terms of the free market, the free trade, Africa trade area?
I will come back to that in specific rather, but this is also incorporated in that, if you may.
Yes, so we don't quite compete, but then what we try to do, again, we have to go back to the free trade area because there are a lot of negotiations ongoing, and one key thing that is always included in negotiation is the benefits or the opportunities for the small countries. So whenever we sit on the table, we always look at what is the advantage or what are there in for the big countries, but also what are there for the small countries. So these usually come very clear in the discussions. They are the experts in those negotiations. So whatever you are negotiating, you look at the strength of your country or the opportunities that are available as far as your country is concerned, and you try to present them during those negotiations. So
we'll come back to what the Gambia has to gain in this Africa free trade area. But let's just still go back to what's been done in terms of making the environment conducive for the private sector.
Again, the private sector, for private sector, one thing we try to do, and then that is very, very responsive in trying to support the private sector, is the creation of a GAIPA and then the expansion of their mandate to support and then facilitate the registrations, and then also providing some kind of incentive for expansions.
In the GCCI as well?
GCCI also has been very supportive to the private sector as an umbrella body for the private sector bodies. But then again, coming back to GAIPA, they have what we call this special investment certificate that usually we give to some of those small enterprises to be able to have some free space to be able to expand and then grow gradually. And then that's also helpful because it helps to protect them to some extent to be able to compete both internally and externally.
Let me come back to you, Director, and just tell us exactly in terms of the private sector investment, what are some of the key areas that you're looking at here?
The key, let me just add something to what Pierre said before coming to that. What, as government, what we do in terms of policy and also trade agreements is for the private sector. So government would negotiate the rules, but the beneficiaries is the private sector. So when you talk about private sector-led growth, you are looking at government setting the scene, but the private sector taking advantage. So this is why all our interventions as the ministry in terms of the project programs that we have is to support that private sector growth. And the private sector in the Gambia is 80–90% MSME. So this is why we look at the whole MSME range and see what programs we can have in terms of capacity building, in terms of value addition, what they can do in terms of entrepreneurship development. So all the agencies, GAIPA, and also the project that we have and the programs at the level of the ministry is how do we support this process to make sure that we have enough capacity of the private sector to be able to take advantage of the policy environment, to be able to take advantage of the trade agreements that are negotiated by government.
So I was still going to come to the Africa Free Trade area because this is, this is a very important conversation in this part of what we're talking about here. And just if you would tell us exactly what the Gambia stands to gain here, because first, the Gambia is the only country in Africa with using the dollar as its currency. And first, we don't have the same currency in Africa first, and then the Gambia is a very small country. What is our competitive advantage at this point? What do we stand to gain in this Africa Free Trade area?
Okay, so Africa Free Trade area is like, we look at it from the global sense, or from a regional sense. It's like a win situation for Africa as a continent, because one thing it is going to do is going to attract, it's going to put Africa on the map, because the last time I was saying this, if you look at the, it's like you are bringing together a population of 1.2 billion people. So that's a huge market. And then if you combine the GDP, it's about 4.3 trillion. So compare, I mean, this means Africa now has the potential to be as powerful as China and India. So this is the level of strength that this combination is going to bring. But again,
powerful as in for the biggest developing countries in Africa, or the small countries also with the, of course, small, economic returns have something to gain in it?
Yeah, so up to now, Africa has been disadvantaged in the sense that we tend to deal with our developing partners on individual basis. But then this free trade area is now giving Africa the opportunity to negotiate on a global term. And that itself gives it strength and the negotiation power to be able to determine things in their favor. But then if we look at that, that's a global advantage for our regional advantage. But then within that advantage, then countries have to also position themselves to be able to take internal advantage of the trickle-down effect that this regional integration is going to bring. And this is where, at the negotiation table, small countries are also going to usually will have to do an in-house assessment of their economy and then present things in their favor. And we have negotiators from the Gambia, and he is one of those negotiators. And then we have negotiation trade, we negotiation services, and then regularly they meet, and then we present our economic situations, and then we negotiate in our favor. So these talks are ongoing.
So, Director, what exactly are we presenting that is supposed to come in our favor?
Yeah, so For Gambia as an LDC, because when we look at the one of the negotiating modalities is that we have to inbuild special and differential treatment among ourselves. So we know that we have some developing countries, we have some LDCs within the negotiating bloc. So then we have to, as an LDC, we have to be able to bring inbuild some measures in the agreement that will give us a much longer time in terms of liberalization. For example, liberalization is the tariff reduction, for within the African countries. And there are so many measures that are giving some flexibility for the LDCs as far as the AFCFTA is concerned. But we should look at AFCFTA not only in the aspect of trade, because AFCFTA is a very comprehensive trade agreement that looks at investment policies within Africa. It also looks at competition policies. These are going to be the phase 2 of the AFCFTA. So one, we're going to liberalize our tariff, but we're going to also identify some service sectors that are going to be liberalized for trade purpose. But we're also going to harmonize our investment policies and also our competition policies. So in the short to medium term, we may experience some revenue losses at the beginning because tariff will be liberalized. But in the long term, we may experience some investment, from other countries outside African continent to be able to take advantage of the African market.
I hope this in any way doesn't encourage exploitation in any way, would you say?
Of course, there will be some, any investment that is going to be in the Gambia will have to go by the principles and the laws of the Gambia. So how you will not be able to exploit, because in terms of investment policies, harmonizing them, it will give you a minimum standards for investment policies and competition policies. But at the national level, you are also required to do national standards in terms of investment. So we will decide what sort of investment should come here. But you will see some countries who want to access, for example, practical example is you will see some countries like Asian countries, for example, want to access Nigerian market, for example. But they will know that Nigeria is a big market, and then you may have some multinationals in Nigeria that they can be prone to competition. So they will say, okay, instead of going to Nigeria to establish, why not I go to Gambia? Because with the AFCFTA, I will be able to establish in Gambia, and then I will be able to access Nigerian market.
Well, let's shift as well to look at how the cooperation with the services sector is really coming along. Is there anything we can be hopeful for, especially in just, diversifying? We mentioned diversification, but I'm not only interested in this in terms of agriculture, but also other sectors, from technology, from entertainment, if you like, and just making sure that, there is economic prosperity from every other angle. When you look at countries like Nigeria, these developing countries in the African continent, you look at Ghana, they're very much exploiting the fintech industry as well, and just encouraging young techies to be the drivers of the economic growth. And I know that the NDP is also very conscious of how we can use technology to our advantage in making sure we realize the goal.
Yes, and we are also conscious of that. And as it's not a matter of choice. For technology now is a must. Everybody has to take advantage of it because it has a lot of positive attributes. One of it is it's able to reduce the cost of production drastically, and that's drive the price, the price stability that we just discussed.
Is this something you're keen on at the level of the Trade Ministry?
Yes. As recent as last month, we've developed a concept and concept about e-commerce. E-commerce, and then the idea behind is to try to digitalize businesses, and this is one key concept that the ministry is trying to drive. But then again, we also want to ensure that ICT as an infrastructure drive most of our economic activity. So technology definitely, as enshrined in the National Development Plan, is going to drive most of our economic activity. The ministry is conscious of that, and we are trying to set aside investments with regards to that.
Director, I know that, of course, in diversifying as well, other countries are looking into the telecommunications industry, transport, water and sanitation. I've already mentioned technology. I asked in the beginning how you're promoting private investments in this country to see really if these are areas that we're also looking at putting proper investment into. Is that something you're also taking on?
Yeah, if you look at, I will take you back to the AFCFTA negotiation. As I said, we are looking at not only trading goods, but also we are looking at trading services. And then during the negotiation, we decide that we're going to look at 5 service sectors, and these sectors include business services, telecommunication services, transport, finance, and tourism services.
Good.
So these are the service sectors that come out to be the priority for the continent, and in fact for the Gambia, in terms of liberalizing to encourage investment in those sectors. So at the policy level, is a priority, and we are committed to see that we have investment in these 5 priority sectors. I can add some few things on what Pierre said about the telecommunication on ICT. We know that the COVID pandemic has really disrupted supply chains in terms of trade globally, and this really affects the Gambia as a net importer of food. We've seen that the prices of certain products goes up because the cost of bringing them went up by 100%. Container price has gone up in November from November to around December, up by 100%. So as a result, we've seen also that due to government measures to contain the spread of the disease, there are some measures that in terms of public gatherings were banned, and this affects some of the businesses, especially the Lumo market was hit by COVID, because some of those people, like the women, they cannot sell, they cannot go to the market. So we felt that it's high time we think of technology. How do we embed technology in trade to ensure that we are able to trade, electronically, through e-commerce? So the concept has been developed. We are also doing some assessment on e-commerce and digitalization of Gambian economy, and through that we want to develop some project proposals that we work with the partners in terms of resource mobilization. So we are getting support from some of the development partners like the EIF. They are supporting that process. What we are also doing with ITC in Geneva through a funding from EIF is to create, is a project that we are just implementing to create a digital platform for market linkages, where the platform where we will, where the producers of some of the agricultural products, including horticultural products, and some of the intermediaries like logistic companies and some of the buyers. Because what happens in the Gambia, there are a lot of production, especially during the onion season, but we are also importing a lot of this product coming. So some of the buyers, they don't even know these products, they are here, they can be accessed. So we are creating a platform in that project where they can, in that platform, they can able to link, and then you can able to see which product is available at which location, as far as the whole country is concerned.
I think these are really great policies and ideas, and the fact that most times our people are already or have already started from somewhere, but it's like along the line they just get stuck and they're just unable to just move and expand and just explore all these fancy ideas that other countries are already putting into practice. Pierce, so what has been our case here? What is it that has been going wrong for especially, our small experts, or, experts cannot be small, but then our just small, smart young people that we see especially doing all these wonderful things, yet gets really stuck in somewhere. I don't really know what it is.
It's a combination of factors. I mean, usually for a development process, usually to take off is usually a challenge, because a lot of factors will pull you down. And one of those, one of the major hindrances to moving from one step to another has to do with resource constraint. You can have very beautiful ideas, like all these ideas he's talking about. The next stage is resource mobilization. So it's not still guaranteed that the required resources will be available. So if you don't get the required resources, you can have a very beautiful idea, you can put them on paper, but then the implementation stage becomes a problem.
So you've realized you know, the weaknesses here and where the problem is actually.
Yeah.
So I know we've talked a lot about what you're doing to just encourage these SMEs and just take advantage of all these you know, new developments that's coming. But at your own level as the ministry, is there any way that you want to support them just economically to make sure that they exploit these opportunities?
Yeah, we have been doing that, and then we will continue to do that. And
you've been doing that in what kind of businesses?
I mean, supporting the MSMEs.
Yes.
Oh yeah, we've been supporting them a lot in, especially in our collaboration with our existing projects. Projects like YEPS, I think, if I can remember the figure, has benefited over 200 MSMEs over the period. We have EIF, which has also supported, and then the UNDP project that we are also currently in the ministry has also do give support in terms of capacity building, but also value additions. So, but also we also tend to support young entrepreneurs, building their skills and give them mini grants for a startup.
You do give them mini grants?
We do, yes.
How much would you say is your mini grant?
Recently, there is an advert on papers from ILO,
okay,
and which is inviting youth entrepreneurs to apply, and of course we are currently negotiating on how much is going to be given as a grant. But then this is
because I know some of them still say that the mini grants are still not enough to just go about where they want to reach. So I'm sure you'll come up with a very good figure.
Those are good feedbacks that we'll take on board and then look within and then discuss them. Yeah.
Yes, before I let you go, I know we have 2 questions we will look at also on social media, but just that we've talked about every important thing about the private sector and just using technology to our advantage. But electricity, have you realized that that is also a very important element in just materializing this goal?
Yeah, it's one of the most important factors that needs to be looked at, because the moment you go out trying to lure investors into the country, among the first thing they will look at is your energy supply, and then the cost of energy in your country, because it contributes to a large extent to your production cost. So that's very, very important, and I'm sure the ministry responsible is also looking at that. I'm sure they are also trying to see how we can improve the energy supply and then make it as reasonable as possible. But that's very, very important to us as a Minister of Trade. If the more it can go down, the better for us, because that's help us in our negotiation in trying to attract investors.
And even the smooth supply.
Exactly.
And that will make me want to go onto social media and just take a brief look at some of the questions you've been sending to us. And we just have someone here, Jombulu, is asking, why the skyrocketing of the basic commodities in the Gambia, the likes of rice, fuel, oil, etc. So the president is still talking about the rise in prices of the basic commodities that we've... Maybe you give him assurance once again, PS.
Yes. To be honest, the ministry is doing a lot in trying to stabilize the price or even bring down the price. One of the our biggest assignment as a ministry, and then time and time we engage the importers, we engage other stakeholders like the shipping agencies, the Gambia Ports Authority, and other stakeholders to discuss on around the price of basic commodities. So we go to the extent of trying to look at the cost structure of these commodities. But you also have to remember that most of these commodities are imported to the country. So you only have control over some element of it, and that is how much is imposed at the level of ports. But before getting to the ports, the cost, the CIF value, that's the cost, insurance, and the ferry, up to the level of the ports, those are outside the control of the ministry. So our negotiations start with what extra costs are imposed on these goods once they are deposited to the time they get to the warehouse. So we try as much as possible. I mean, we've done a lot in trying to reduce or eliminate some of those levies that are already on top of these goods, just to bring it down. But again, also what we try to do as a ministry is also to avoid a situation where few businessmen will corner the market by collaborating. The ministry, once ever we are aware of that, we tend to call them and try to have a serious discussion with them to ensure that the prices are not
But have you been taking any concrete action against these people?
Yeah, we do, because sometimes we sit with them and then pass strong, because we sit with them and then we ask for justification for the prices. And unless there is a good justification for the price to be at a certain level, the ministry usually gives instruction for the price to be.
So someone can easily go to the ministry and report if these cases are seen.
Exactly. Yeah.
Now this last question here is no tax on foodstuff. Why the prices are rising? So there is no tax on foodstuff, yet the price is rising. That's what the person is asking.
Yes. So
did you say there's no tax on foodstuff?
Yeah, basically, yes, there is. He will elaborate on that, but there is elimination of duties on our essential commodities. There are goods that we call essential commodities, that's the rice, the oil, and others. So yes, we eliminate duties on top of those goods. But then again, it goes back to two things: the importation, and for those goods that are produced locally, the cost of production again is also expensive. And this has to do with the fact that we are not using appropriate technology. So, for example, if you talk about rice production, or somebody will say, why is the local rice still expensive? It will be expensive because you're paying so much on labor when an appropriate machine could be used to harvest something, and then at a very reasonable cost, and also reduce the post-harvest losses. But once all these things are not eliminated, the cost of local production will still be up. And then it is difficult to ask a farmer who spends so much on his products to say, because this is produced locally.
It's way more expensive than machinery. I mean, so I think it's a cross-cutting challenge that I've realized here. And Director, if you may just come in before we close it here, would you say boosting local production in all these dimensions would be the solution to what we are faced with?
Exactly, because we are net importers. So if you are a net importer, you are vulnerable to external shocks. So what we are seeing in the distributive trade, and especially from November 2020 to December towards January 2021, we are seeing external shocks to the chain that affect the price. Because what happened is most of our products are coming from Southeast Asia. And then because of the COVID pandemic, there are restrictions in terms of movement, even at the ports, even production levels were scaled down. So all this is a cost in terms of bringing some of these products. So our best bet is to promote import substitution strategies to develop our domestic production, to be able to get all these things by ourselves. Then we will protect or shield the economy from external shocks. So this is something that we have to work on, between the medium to long term. We have to be able to produce locally, to able to shield the economy from external shocks.
Pandemics affect the world, but weaker nations are in fact at the most disadvantaged, really. And I think that has pretty much shown us where the opportunities could be, if you may agree on this. And just players going forward, we've mentioned all these areas that the government is pretty much keen on looking at, and just promoting the SMEs. What would be your words to them in terms of what they could expect, and just our investors, local investors as well, those in the diaspora and who could just easily invest here? What can they expect in the coming years?
Yes, the ministry would continue to work with them. There are opportunities, but then again, one of the biggest hindrance has to do with sensitization, and the ministry has that responsibility to scale it up. So in the coming months or years, we will scale up our communication, try to educate or sensitize this business community as to the opportunities that are available, so that they can take the advantage of those opportunities. our various projects that are out there that can also help in trying to build their capacities, both in terms of training, providing the entrepreneur skills, and providing mini grants. We will try as much as possible to continue to negotiate with our partners so that we have more of this, and then try to strengthen these MSMEs, because we know these are the institutions that we rely on to move this country to another level.
Do you have the specific, just briefly, areas that you're looking at in terms of support you will give these MSMEs?
Yeah, so we do have, again, you
have your priorities at the level of government in terms of trade and investment in this area, or you're just open to any idea?
Yeah, he talks about some of the service areas that that's our priorities, yes. Telecommunication, tourism, finance, and etc.
So still on those?
Yes. So these are areas that we will give priority to, but then again, we are not closing doors on any potential investor in any of the areas.
I know I was supposed to ask you proudest moments, but I think we've already said what you're doing already in this regard. But everything we've mentioned, just to wrap it up, is this something that, or are there things that are peculiar to, small economies, and just how hopeful we can be as a country?
Yes, these are general characteristics of small economy in the developing countries.
You agree to that, Director?
Yes.
Okay, PS, go on.
So, what is the question?
Yes, so I was just asking that every other thing we've, talked about in regards to especially the challenges we're faced with, are they peculiar to, weaker, small economies, and just how hopeful we can be as a country?
Yes, so yes.
As a developing country.
Yes, so so the challenges we mentioned here, they are generally peculiar. They are not peculiar to small economy, but then yes, these are general problems for the small economy. So, but as a small country, also you have to look at the opportunities that are there, because for every disadvantage there is an advantage somewhere. So this is where we need to explore. And one thing I mentioned is the strategic location of the Gambia, and so we need to take advantage of that. And also the fact that Gambia is an Anglophone country within the Francophone, and the language for international trade is English. So this is also an advantage that we can explore, because you tend to attract investment just because of that language also. So these are some of the advantages we have to look at and then study them properly, and then scale up our engagement for investors outside, so that we can have more foreign direct investment into the country. So so with that, we will be able to move this country to another level.
We hope so, PS. Well, that was the Permanent Secretary there, Mr. Ibrahim Sisawa, and he's been here with his able Director of Trade, Usman Bojan. PS and Director, many thanks for coming on the show.
Thank you.
That was all we had time for on this edition of the OGI. I remain your host, Fatu Eli Komoloshi. Till we come your way again next week as we continue this conversation on, of course, what the ministries are doing in line with the NDP 2018-2021. Enjoy the rest of our programs.